Today's keynote, we're excited to present two prominent thought leaders in our community who are helping to shape and influence Hispanic leaders of tomorrow. Thaddeus Arroyo, CEO of AT&T Consumer, has held several leadership positions in leading technology development and transformation in the telecommunications industry. He has been a longtime friend, mentor, and member of High Tech, where he served as an executive board member for many years and most recently became a Hall of Fame inductee in 2019. Maria Lensing, SVP and CTO of Infrastructure, Engineering, and Operations for McKesson Corporation, has held leadership positions driving integrated technology solutions and fueling digital transformations for Fortune 10 companies worldwide. Maria is passionate about STEM opportunities for our youth and actively champions minority inclusion and women in leadership efforts. She has received awards and recognition for her work, including the Tech Titans Corporate CTO Award in 2021, being named the 100 Most Influential Hispanic Leaders in Technology in 2020 by High Tech, the 2019 Women in Business by the Dallas Business Journal, and the Top 12 Latina Corporate Executives of the Year in 2018 by Latina Style Inc. Please welcome Thaddeus and Maria.
Hello, High Tech Familia.
Hello,
Very
everyone.
nice to see you here. So Thaddeus, it's good to see you again. We're in Dallas and yet we're far away because of the way our new communication works. So I figure for our keynote, why don't we start by doing a couple of lightning rounds and we can tell people a little bit of ourselves personally, and then we can get some good questions after that. What do you think?
Sounds good, Maria. Yep.
All right, so let's start with, what is your family's origin?
It's Spanish and Mexican.
For me, it's Peru and Spain. What is your favorite book?
It's The Art of Possibility by Ben Zander.
For me, it's Your Ship by Captain Michael Abrashoff. What's your favorite quote? And I know you have many, so pick two.
Well, yeah, I have a lot. Maybe just share a couple. One by Thomas Edison. It's when he said, I haven't failed. I've only found 10,000 ways that won't work. And maybe another along those lines by Albert Einstein. And it's the important thing is not to stop questions, because curiosity has its own reason for existing.
I love that. For me, it's similarly from Einstein. Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. And also, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're usually right, which is by Henry Ford. What languages do you speak?
Well, I'd say English and Spanish, but, you could probably debate the Spanish one.
Well, leave it there. I will give you credit. I think it's just fine. English and Spanish as well here. And let's finish with, since we're going to put you on the spot around Spanish, what is your favorite expression in Spanish?
Well, for me, it's a quote, and I'll refer to it later here, but it's sin límites.
For me, something my mom used to say a lot: a los niños malcriados no los quiere nadie. Well, listen, hopefully you guys on the phone get to know us a little bit better, more this way. Let's just start with some questions around what we're here to talk about. Leadership in not just technology, but in general, and how our community can really separate us and inform that. So Thaddeus, you've been in several leadership positions, from CIOs of Singular Wireless to leading technology development across AT&T, where you became CEO of AT&T Business and now CEO of AT&T Consumer. Part of your leadership skill set is your ability to identify and develop talent from the ground up. I can see that. I've lived through it. Truly investing in people's growth and potential. How does your background and culture inform your leadership? And how do you think your life experiences may have influenced your career and or your success?
Great. Well, thanks, Maria. I like that question. And, before we start today's conversation, I want to just start by saying it's always great to connect with you, and also importantly here to reconnect with this ever evolving high tech community. You know, I've been around since the early days, and I love to watch it grow and flourish. But let me just start by sharing that, you know, my life, it's been interesting and you know, sometimes unexpected journey. And I can honestly say that I never would have anticipated, you know, where it would end up, particularly from a career perspective. You know, my father immigrated from Spain, and my mother is the daughter of Mexican immigrants. And, you know, as a naturalized U.S. citizen, you know, my father always instilled in me and, you know, all of my siblings a sense of responsibility for embracing, you know, all the opportunities that this country has allowed us. And, you know, what my parents taught me was to dream big and to see possibilities instead of limits. And they taught me that through education, hard work, and perseverance, that, you know, great things can happen. And, you know, with that, I think, and this is an important part of the upbringing, I think that has driven so much of what I do personally and professionally. But, you know, I think I find a lot of the genesis that in the quote I shared earlier, one that my mother always used with me, and that's around, you know, sin límites. And that really means just without limits. And to me, the simple but prevailing phrase, you know, means that we can't allow our own perceptions to place artificial limits on, you know, what's possible for ourselves, and, you know, even more importantly, you know, for others, and particularly when we're in leadership roles. And, you know, it's through this lens, through this ultimately element of what was part of my upbringing, that I've adopted a philosophy that's guided me through my career. And frankly, you know, one that's centered on this always seeking the art of the possible. And you know, along the way, you know, I've discovered, you know, some key lessons that are, I think, core to that upbringing that have influenced me, you know, through my personal, through my professional life. And, you know, I think it begins with, you know, the first lesson, and that's just taking calculated risks. And, you know, I look back to, you know, even the time in choosing what I was going to do in my studies in college. And when I graduated high school, you know, students didn't have easy access to computers, and we certainly didn't have one in my house, but yet I chose to pursue a career in mathematics and computer science, you know, just placing that calculated bet on the skills that I believe would be relevant in the future. And you know, to build on this first guiding principle, I also learned the importance of pursuing discomfort and, you know, embracing, you know, those pivots in life that have you stepping out of your comfort zone. You know, we grow from facing the unfamiliar because it allows us to benefit from this benefit of inexperience when we go and do new things. And, you know, inexperience brings with it a clean slate, because we don't bring in preconceived notions if we haven't done that before. And it allows us to approach opportunities with a completely open mind. And, you know, over the course of my career, you know, I've learned it's in those experiences when you're stepping into these positions of disruption, of change, that you grow the most, both personally and professionally. And, you know, and then I think in another important lesson here, again, that's part of that upbringing, and at least the cultural, you know, benefits of, you know, being the son of a generation that emigrated to this country is ultimately just not limiting ourselves based on, you know, our past experiences or historical perceptions of what we can accomplish. Instead, it's about finding ways to magnify our own strengths, and importantly, as leaders, to magnify the individual strengths of our teams. And so as we, you know, move deeper into this increasingly digitally driven world, I think it's important, you know, to think through those lessons in our upbringing that highlight, you know, what is it that will strengthen us as leaders, and ultimately using that to alter how we manage our teams and bring forward, you know, the influence, the best of our past in leading, you know, this future workforce. And, you know, I think an important, you know, area, and one more important today than ever before, that I would sum up, you know, many, you know, I guess of these core beliefs that have come through my upbringing, and that is about being adaptive and always learning, right? In terms of how we approach life and ultimately approach our careers. And finally, you know, and I think one that is a final element, I'd say, that embodies, you know, many aspects of this, is really all around trust. And, you know, I can apply this in the team setting and just say that no team's going to succeed if leaders, you know, use the fear of failure to guide decision making, rather than, you know, giving the team confidence that they're trusted to act quickly, and then remember the saying as we approach it, whether, you know, it's anything we're doing in our personal lives or professional life. and particularly with our teams, and that is that failure is not fatal and success is not permanent. And so, I think I now step back and I say, as leaders, we have to learn to embrace opportunities and challenges as well as make adjustments along the way. And ultimately, success is a journey of growth and experiences. And so let me just turn the tables a little bit here, Maria, because I want to, ask you a question. And, I think you've achieved impressive milestones in your career. You've gained unique experiences along the way. You've taken those across multiple industries, whether it's in technology or innovation. And so, with that as the backdrop, what are some of the key characteristics that have been essential in driving, your success forward? And, how can that be beyond inspirational, but frankly, informational, as we look at, how to advance other Hispanic careers, or for that matter, anyone else to achieve greater success?
Yeah, thanks for that, Thaddeus. And honestly, you covered a lot of what I would say has been a recipe for success. And I will start with attitude, right? And by that, I mean that positive outlook, that looking for opportunities around you. And you said it, without limits, right? We don't put limits in our head. And I'll be also very transparent that as a woman, a lot of times that also is super important in my mental state. Like, I need to shut down a lot of things so that I can concentrate on the positivity of what's coming. You said something that is also very key, that has been what I consider a recipe for success, and it's taking calculated risks. And I learned this from you, Thaddeus. You used to say, don't let comfort become the enemy of growth. And that stayed with me, because embracing what's new and embracing pivots that life or careers or those risks that you take bring your way are going to help you grow. And you have to be thoughtful about what new experiences can help you get to new levels. And then approach it with that learning mindset. It's that intellectual curiosity to approach any opportunity with the benefit of the new slate, right? We don't have any preconceptions when we go into something new. And so even within your own companies, I know AT&T gave me many opportunities when I was with them to try new things. And in each one, what did I learn? How can I do a step level improvement to where I was? And by the way, at the very basics of everything is you got to perform. You got to be clear, find clarity about what is the outcomes that you're trying to drive. You've got to know how that aligns to the growth priorities and initiatives in your company, and make sure that you know how to communicate that in a way that is impactful, that matters to the different business owners. And the last part, which is really strong for us as Hispanics, is you call it adaptability. Some people call it resiliency, but it's just that getting smart about what works and what doesn't, and be comfortable with the pivoting. It's not being dishonest to who you are, but it's that ability to polish and learn to be better as we go. And when we have that mindset, right, you have the right mental attitude to go about things and see them as opportunities, everything coming your way, knowing that what the risk might be, having that learning mindset, adapting and having resiliency. I think that has been a recipe of success for me, at least, to help me really drive success, right? And get to higher positions that sometimes I didn't expect myself, but didn't shy away from those opportunities to do so. Which brings me to another question, maybe turn it around back to you, Thaddeus. Mm-hmm. When Hispanics, and if you look at the fact that we account for nearly 19% of the US population, and we represent the largest multicultural segment today, when we examine opportunities ahead of us, and you look at the things that in your experience different Hispanics have brought to the table, what would you say is a competitive advantage that Hispanics bring to the workplace?
Great. And, maybe I'll try to package this up in a way of, when I kind of look across, many who've worked for me in the past and those I've seen, achieve, successes well beyond, what they were, when they were ultimately in any organization that I led. I think there's some really common characteristics that ultimately, and pervasively break through. And, I'd say a few of these really always surround. And by the way, I'd apply this to, traits I saw in your approach to leadership, across multiple roles. And, I think it begins with embracing a disruptive mentality as you approach, whatever you're tackling, and bringing with this hunger for continuous learning, and importantly for growth, and importantly along that way is developing skills and experience that puts you right at this magic place, this intersection of opportunity and relevancy, because it takes all of those elements coming together. I've learned that you grow the most personally and professionally, as I mentioned before, when you step into these positions of disruption and change. But it's important to understand, to really go and embrace, many of these characteristics, many of these approaches to leadership, to life, is that, we have to overcome our own natural instincts, because it's not a natural instinct for us to put ourselves in that type of position. And frankly, you need to be intentional. And, as an example, when I was asked, to go lead our business, to become the CEO in Mexico after we had acquired the number 3 and the number 4 wireless companies in that country, I hesitated a bit. And frankly, honestly, I hesitated a lot. And, when I was approached with that opportunity, and, because it wasn't what I had envisioned for my future, and, it wasn't great timing for my family. And on top of all that, despite, my proud Hispanic heritage, and coming from parents whose first language was Spanish, I just wasn't comfortable with my Spanish speaking skills, particularly in leading in teams based in Mexico. And but one of the things, as I went back to what I spent so many years talking about, and at least encouraging others to do, I knew this was an opportunity to pursue some discomfort. And it turned out that this experience, like all other non-traditional moves in my career, proved out to be immensely gratifying and enriching, and frankly beyond skills building, life building skills. And it allowed me to work closely with our team in Mexico to overcome some challenges and serve them as they defined a path for success. And it was exciting to lead this transformation during such a historical moment for the telecommunications industry in Mexico. It would have been easy for me to turn down the opportunity and to think of all the reasons why it just wasn't a good option, because I knew the uphill climb was going to be substantial, and I knew it would be challenging. But this tremendous personal and professional growth opportunity never would have happened if it didn't start by me saying yes. And so I'm fortunate that because of the simple lessons that were instilled in me early in life about living without these self-imposed limits, embracing disruption and growth, that, I've been able to continuously step out of my comfort zone. And when I look at others, and I could look at your career, I could look at many other ones, it's those who do this that drive the greatest growth. And I believe that this is a mindset that anyone can choose to adopt. And you said it, and I've said it for so many years. This is so that comfort doesn't become that enemy of growth. And and the good news is that as society becomes more connected, the eminent opportunities for Hispanics in this country are going to grow at an unprecedented pace. And a couple of stats I'll close with here, because I think this is important, in that the U.S. Hispanic cohort now represents more than $1.9 trillion of annual purchasing power. And according to the U.S. Department of Labor, we're projected to account for 78% of growth in the U.S. labor force between 2020 and 2030. In fact, Hispanics are expected to represent 1 out of 5 workers by 2030. And even more, Hispanics are the youngest and fastest growing demographic. And according to Stanford's 2020 Latino Entrepreneurship Initiative report, the Hispanic community is starting businesses at a faster rate than the national average, growing 34% over the last decade, compared to just 1% for other small businesses. And whether it's starting new businesses or entering into emerging and growing industries, being successful requires embracing these commitments, this approach, and importantly, this continuous and lifelong learning journey. And I think an important area here is that it's up to us, it's up to leaders, and frankly, for those that want to grow, to implement these new pathways, and importantly enough, to also invest back so that we can help other Hispanics advance in technology skills domains, as well as to collaborate, with each other to shape our emerging digital ecosystem, because we know that's where tomorrow's opportunities are going to be.
That's awesome, Thaddeus.
Yeah. And, I think, Maria, when we look and, I think, I like to sum this up by saying that it's clear that our growing Hispanic community is going to become this critical foundation of growth, because it is an important growing element of society. And, we have a lot of potential to strengthen the impact in fueling this economy. And so another important element, though, is about, influencing our environment and how we bring this new potential, how we bring potential even outside of the Hispanic community to bear through the power of diversity. So Maria, it seems to me that, we all know that companies are placing stronger emphasis in advancing the diversity of their workforce, working towards fostering, stronger work cultures based on that. So as society transitions to, this new way to work, and, how can Hispanic leaders, through your lens, ensure that they're strengthening the inclusiveness of their work environment, especially in the technology industry?
Yeah, that's a great question, Thaddeus. And, given all the facts that you share with us, I am compelled to share it. No, just kidding. I think the first thing that I tell people, and I don't know if they know, I know you know because you move in this world, but Latinos rank in the highest minority groups that have adopted digital solutions and actually shown willingness, right, to immerse in new experiences that the digital world is bringing forth. And so when I look at our impact and what companies are looking at diversity, and if we think of diversity as introducing new perspectives, new ideas, new voices to the tables in which we make decisions, then us as a Latino community have embraced not only the technology, but have a new opportunity altogether. And I think you said something critical there as well, which is we also need to acknowledge that our society has changed forever. The past 2 years have created societal norms that have now, on a global expanse, changed how we're going to interact moving forward. So back to the question of knowing, how this community can be receptive to change and knowing that companies are realizing the power of different points of view, how do we leverage what makes us great in this new digital age? For me, first is for us to know our power. And by that, I mean, we have a voice, 1.3 trillion purchasing power. I mean, we have a strong voice. It's not always been heard before. And now we have a broader audience, which by the nature of these new ways of collaborating can actually have much, much higher impact than ever. So how are you bringing your voice forward? And what are you saying? I think my second advice is, now that you know your power, that your voice is being heard, is be intentional about what you're going to say. And that's just you as an individual in general, as Hispanics. When they look at us, we're representing our community. And then when you elevate that to leadership, like you said, Thaddeus, right, as leaders, then that's a completely different responsibility. And that is about us ensuring that we're bringing about the diversity of those opinions and thoughts to our own tables. And regardless of the channel, whether it's digital, whether that's in person, we need to make sure that we're making a space to hear all the voices that can contribute to what we're doing. When I also think about other dynamics, I know that I hear a lot, what makes us great as Latinos is that warm hug, is that warmth that comes through in our communities. Well, how are we sending that forth? How can we share that in a digital piece? Well, bring some of that. I always start with the warmness of our own communities, and I'm not afraid to finish an email or a sentence or a meeting with gracias or, ciao, guys. There's such a dynamic there that we can push forth. And Thaddeus, right, when I think back to how we're talking about this connectedness and how we're talking about this new world in which the limits, the barriers of countries have gone away because now we all communicate real time. I'm starting to think also of how that connectedness has been more important than ever in the way we live as well, not just work, and how we engage with families and communities. So through the lens of your summit theme of Technology Tomorrow here, what digital trends, I'm going to turn it around to you now, do you believe are impacting Hispanics? And how can technology help advance their professional and personal priorities?
Yeah, for sure. And I think not only they impacting Hispanics, I think they represent, the opportunities that Hispanics need to keep in the forefront, as they make choices for careers and for investing in skill set development. Because the way that we live, work, and engage with others has shifted, and it's shifted on a global scale. And at the heart of this transformation is really connectivity and technology. And, if you look at, how society has responded and embodied this new approach, particularly over the last couple of years, one thing stands out above all else, and that's this need to be connected has never been more important. And, we're at the dawn of a new age of connectivity, powered by ubiquitous and growing availability of modern, wireless networks, our 5G networks, as well as what's happening now in the connectivity to homes that's being enabled with multi-gigabit fiber. This is helping to do nothing short of cultivating a stronger sense of connection for consumers, for businesses, but ultimately, changing how you engage with communities, how we engage with families, whether you're at home, on the go, or anywhere in between. But importantly here, I believe that being connected is becoming more essential, and that our investments in these capabilities, and more importantly, what we do with these, become the foundation for growing, tomorrow's, hybrid reality. When we examine, this through the lens of our Hispanic community, it's interesting. I think you have to go look, and I'll share some of the statistics behind it. You mentioned it, right, in terms of our engagement with technology. And that is that, we tend to engage at a more robust and innovative level than ever before, and frankly, than other cohorts. And, there's several studies out there, but they all indicate the same, that, Hispanics are early adopters and influencers of technology. About 89% of Hispanics use smartphones as their favorite type of device for staying connected, and 35% are usually the first in their group of friends to experience new devices or technology. And this mobile first audience accounts for 1/5 of the US millennial population. And by 2025, 27% of the Gen Z population is going to be Hispanic. And so clearly the Hispanic community is not only growing, but growing in the right places, the right ways, as technology and the demand for connectivity is going to play a pivotal role in the evolution of where opportunity comes from. And so, Maria, looking at the opportunities ahead of us and creating a sustainable workforce and a technologically leading society is going to depend on empowering Hispanics to not only use, but shape and adopt to the next wave of innovation, and to bring the disruptive thinking to make that possible, collaborating, with leaders, with organizations, and developing an intentional approach to creating, a workplace that brings Hispanic talent in to harness this long-term potential to, implement these capabilities, and across disciplines. By implementing, this same approach in our life, whether it's continuous skills building or ultimately looking for, common ways to adapt, it's really doing nothing short of just opening up, new doors to these new digitally fueled experiences. And that drives our professional growth, but even personal growth, and I think as we look to expand maybe a little more, Maria, on this topic, I want to ask you around something around ways to do this, and maybe through this lens of mentorship and what we do to develop and help bring in the next generation. Because, mentorship is a key element to growing leaders and to giving opportunities to Hispanics and others. And so what have been some of the successful steps that you've taken to ensure mentorships in place in your organizations, and ultimately, frankly, whether that's in the workplace or out of the workplace?
Yeah, that's a great question, Thaddeus. And usually, right, when we talk about mentorship, I really do like to distinguish between mentorship and sponsorship. And, in my mind, mentorship is that coaching, that developmental advice that you get from somebody outside, where you can be vulnerable and share your concerns, your thoughts. Sponsorship is more about the people that are speaking on your behalf when you're not there. And not always, and this is a hard realization, not all mentors are sponsors. And at times you need to realize that's okay. In my personal experience, I look for two different things. I look for a mentor to be different than a sponsor. And from a mentor or a sponsor, one thing I've learned is we need to have clarity on what I aspire to do before I even talk to them. So I find mentorship to also be specific and time bound. I want to learn something from somebody, or I want to share something to somebody. I also, you have to have a certain amount of savviness to know what to tell or who to tell your aspirations and when. But more importantly, I have found, Thaddeus, that I've been lucky enough to get mentors or sponsors, not intentional, which I do recommend people to be more intentional than I have been. But because you become a magnet when you're somebody that performs well and you work through your values, like you show up with your values, you show up through performance. And that magnetism of there's somebody that's working hard, they have the positive attitude, they're bringing together the kind of values with respect, that has allowed me to develop those mentorships. Now, with time, I've become a lot more intentional to establish relationships of mentorship, and then also authentically build relationships that I didn't realize would become sponsors with time, just because, again, you're creating that magnetism around being who you are, improving yourself, having that learning mindset, having that growth mindset. And then thankfulness. I'm a big believer that you just have to be grateful too for what's coming. So, Thaddeus, I think the last time we all got together, we tell you all the time, thank you for all those of us where you have been both mentors and sponsors and continue to be. And like you've asked in the past, I have the same thing. I think we need to return two things from any situation in a mentorship. You got to be a mentor yourself. You got to pay it forward. And then you have to do what you say you will do. You have to deliver. Because in that, especially as leaders and in technology today, when we're starting to see such a shift in the industry when it comes to talent and having so many opportunities out there, who you are, how you mentor, those mentoring relationships, the kind of a sponsor you are for others, that becomes a brand for you as a leader that people either want to follow or not. And on that note, Thaddeus, I may bring it back your way. When you talk about the workplace being much different than it was 2 years ago, and that we've seen this economic uptick, like I was saying, where people are leaving their jobs to explore new opportunities, and this trend will likely continue right through the coming year. How can organizations stay competitive in this unusual job market to retain top talent?
Yeah, I think it's important, right? I think as we, start to, reflect on the environment around us, to really look that, beyond knowing that we're in this state of accelerated disruption, we know technology's changing, everything, including how we need to engage, today's workers and tomorrow's. But this change is only happening faster and faster. But, in this backdrop of now a full employment economies, I think what's really, important now is that leaders and organizations, we have to manage through these forces of change and probably be, a little more intentional in transforming the legacy business models and the skills of the future. And I'll talk a little more about ultimately creating this North Star for what, employees at least tell us that they're looking for and new team members. But it does always really begin with the basics and the fundamentals, which means building, the pathways for, relevant skill development, and ultimately the environment, that is reflective of ultimately a set of capabilities that will allow you to do that. And then looking around the corner and becoming an organization that is forward thinking and ultimately predictive and focused on what comes next, because that's what employees look at when they're determining which firm to choose from when they have many options. And, we're in a moment, though, where increasingly, employees and team members, and frankly ourselves, I think, probably because of the environment that we've, come out over the last couple of years managing through this global pandemic, but of asking even bolder and bigger questions of how does what we do connect to a greater purpose, and that becomes a very interesting thing of what we see, at least, is we reflect on why people leave and why people choose us, but it's really looking at understanding of how the work they will do in this company is going to connect to that greater purpose as a team member. And frankly, it even extends into questions that our customers are asking us, right, in terms of what you do as a firm. And, and so how do we use ultimately now this this convergence of the changing the way we work and ultimately the what we do to ultimately kind of find that intersection. I believe that for any company, whether it's large or small, creating, a competitive advantage always starts with the composition and character of our teams. Look, most industries, you're buying the same technology, you have the same basic capabilities. So it really comes down to our people. And if this great resignation moment taught us anything, is that, people, they want to be engaged in things that matter. They want to be engaged in stuff that serves a greater purpose. So taking time to understand the element of, whatever industry you're in and how you connect with that, new concept can be communicated. And so staying competitive in this environment really means, that companies have to be more intentional at elevating leaders, elevating our team members, and creating, constructs that allow us to build teams that represent, frankly, the diversity of thought and the diversity of capabilities that are going to allow us to serve our customers. Because, we all know that success is less about the leader and more about magnifying these individual strengths within the team. And then we have to, do something as basic as then empowering our teams. Part of, I think the new way of working and thinking and, beyond then understanding and communicating that sense of purpose is, I think employees, they want to be empowered at a greater level than ever before. They want to feel understood. They want to feel valued and appreciated. And, this starts, I think, with how you build a team and bringing that right diversity. I think it's a business imperative. Importantly, though, it also extends into then how you manage that team to really unlock new possibilities and a higher degree of collaboration and innovation. Because when you create that environment, it's a place where people want to be. I think it's important to remember a quote from a group that I'm proud to be affiliated with, in the National Center for Women in Information Technology. And it really relates to that, the idea that you don't have is the voice you haven't heard. So when you create this capability, this inclusiveness of teams that allows you to drive this collaboration, you get to hear all those voices at the table. And ultimately, when we integrate this way of thinking, we can drive efficiencies because you drive better collaboration, better co-creation, better innovation. And then you set a new pathway for the future of work. And that is the North Star for keeping anyone that you ultimately, can inspire to come to a company. And then to build upon, I think this concept, we have to cultivate this meaningful engagement and creating a culture of flexibility in this new work environment and strengthen our relationship, with our teams, frankly, moving beyond any historical norm. And look, there's many aspects of management that are going to be different in principles. And some of the ones from the past that have stood the test of time will apply. But the important part that, our success in overcoming the challenges of the moment and ultimately the environment we're in is going to be rooted in inspiring that, the gratitude that many of us have for being part of an organization that sees the future, sees an opportunity to change it, to reinvent experiences, and ultimately here, I think, and collectively, and really, and that is just to achieve new possibilities time and time again, right, as we do that. And so I think that becomes for any leader, for any company, that becomes the new North Star that we have to create for attracting and keeping our talent. And so, I think, Maria, we've covered a lot of interesting topics today, and, maybe I can shift gears a little bit and focus on the next one. And that's, really maybe a little more personal here on how to elevate, our identity in the workplace, and so before we wrap up and open up to Q&A, we hear a lot about, being your authentic self, bringing your best self to work every day. You and I have talked about this over the years, and you have a unique way of thinking about that. I think would be helpful to share because, and particularly now through the lens, because as of the community we represent, because as Hispanics, our cultural background, and I don't want to paint a broad brush, but in many respects, the humble approach to issues can sometimes, influence, our performance and how we approach work. And so through that lens, what does being your authentic self mean to you as an individual and to you as a leader?
Yeah, thank you, Thaddeus, for that question, because it's a question that you know better than most. So for those of you here in high-tech familia, Thaddeus was the one that introduced me to high-tech. And I'm sad to say that I had been in the industry for 20 years. And before Thaddeus said, "Are you aware of high-tech?" and brought me to the event that we had, something similar to where you are today. And for the very first time in years of being in technology in different leadership positions, I got to see people like me that had that duality of a home that has different dynamics than the workplace that I'm in, right? That people that were successful in technology leadership roles, and they were not afraid to bring all of them to the table. And I think that was the first time that I truly realized that I had personally distanced myself from my roots, thinking that that was the way to success. And by doing so, I was muting an element of who I am. And that actually comes through. You're not your full self. So from an individual perspective, Thaddeus, high-tech was significant for me to realize who I am, all of me, that the Peruvian, Latina, the mom, the daughter, the sister, all of those together, they are all of it me. Now, what you learn is how to bring that self forward. And I call that style flexing. And I actually learned that also through a high-tech event, listening to the CIO at the time of Bank of America, a lovely lady that talked about style flexing as recognizing when and how to bring what from you to a conversation. And I think the best advice I tell people when they feel like, I shouldn't change anything about me, and that people should take me the way that I am. I said, well, I agree with that, but I'll tell you that at home, I don't talk to my kids the same way I talk to my husband, and even the same way I talk to my brother. So as people in general, we style flex constantly. We're aware of our audience and the message that we're trying to send, and we think about how can that message be delivered in my most authentic way so that it can be received the way it's meant. Because there's a difference between intent and impact, right? What you're trying to say and how it's received. And then Thaddeus, as a leader, I've realized that intent versus impact is everything. It's the difference between what you think you're wanting to say or what you think you're saying and what your team receives and how they absorb it and does it resonate with them. And I'm in the office and apparently the light just went off. So you guys know how we're all learning things. I've also learned that the ability to be empathetic and creating conditions for others to follow is very powerful. I've had situations where I've been vulnerable and share a story, personal, and then my team feels better about it. They're like, I'm so glad you said. I'll give you guys an example. We had leadership meetings all this week. We have a kickoff. McKesson starts their new fiscal year on April 1st. And so we've been here at the office celebrating. And somebody asked, how have you guys been? And I was honest. I'm like, tired. It's been, our last week was really tough. We were getting a lot of things done. We finished great, but it was tiring. And so many people came up and said, we're so glad you said that because they're tired too. So it's that empathetic environment. And it starts with self-reflection, guys. As leaders, you need to look at yourself in the mirror and ask yourself, depending on situations that you're in, am I empathetic? Have I been patient? Am I being tolerant? Am I trying to seek understanding? And as leaders, we must create the conditions for others to be able to do that. So being vulnerable, having that willingness to share who you are and how you're thinking about something in the moment, and that personal element, your authenticness, comes through. So, Thaddeus, for me, authenticity as a leader has become about bringing yourself in a new way to create environments where others are comfortable, bringing themselves as they are to whatever conversations we're in.
Great. I think that's great guidance. And I think we have time for, a couple questions, but I see the first one popped up here. Maybe we'll jump in and I think we can both comment on this. We'll try to be quick so we can maybe take another one after this. I know we'll keep everybody on time, but the first question really relates to the topic of leading without limits or sin límites. And it's really all about the areas. And the question, I like this one and I've had this a lot. And it's really, as Hispanic leaders, what are the areas where we're limiting ourselves or selling ourselves short? And I think it's interesting because, again, it's not a monolithic community, but there are domains, and in each of us, you have to go look at your respective culture. But, I think some common areas that I've seen is maybe in some respects, the humbleness with which we bring, to the workplace and to our jobs, may have us, not wanting to tout and at least communicate our contributions. I think as leaders, we have obligations to do a better job to make sure that we're hearing every voice, but you may not be at one of those tables. So I think leaning forward and making sure that people understand the great contributions that you have is an important area. Because if I was to look at, some common, elements of this, and I've been a party to that myself, is really not wanting to step out because you may seem unhumble in doing so is one of those. And, that's a big one that I see. Maria, why don't you add one and then we'll go to the next question.
Yeah, Thaddeus, I think you nailed it. For me, it's like our humbleness, our loyalty, right? We need to learn how to be confident, humbly confident, and be able to say, do your own horn in a way that is approachable, right? Recognize the team for what they've done, but recognize what you're driving out of that team. So I do believe that that's one of the biggest elements of, I think, escapism when it comes to being a leader and being, moving forward. And then the second one is our financial acumen. And, I've said that before. I think there's a lot that we need to improve when it comes to what financially grows a company, because that really shapes outcomes, which is where businesses want to talk to when you're a leader.
Yeah, that's great. And I would just say we have to step into that position of discomfort and being willing to take those risks. And I was lucky. I had people pushing me along the way to do that. I challenge everyone else. We have our second question in here. And there's another really good one, because I kind of joked about this going to Mexico, but, it's about how can the Latinx community, keep being bilingual. I think that is, as the question was asked here, one of the many Latinx superpowers. And I have to agree, by the way, and I think it's so important. And I see that now as, as I'm raising my children and really trying to bring that forward in the next generation. I happened to grow up in a household as the first generation that they didn't want us speaking Spanish because they wanted us to assimilate. But it is a superpower. And I would just say, I think you have to be intentional, like so much of everything else that we're talking about. Now, being as I went and essentially assumed the role for running the companies that we purchased in Mexico, I got very intentional about the time that I dedicated to ensure that I didn't always have to go in with the translator, and I learned my language again, at least getting comfortable with it. And importantly now, to keep it up, because I think that, it's such an important element of what we do. And I don't know, Maria, I know you're doing this with your children and you face this as well, but how do you think that we could do this in a more broad sense such that, we don't lose this in a generation?
Yeah, Thaddeus, I think you nailed it. Is how are we using the language? Are we even starting our own homes and talking to each other? It's okay. I love once somebody you ask politely, right? Do you speak Spanish? Then speak it. Even this week, as we were talking to different teams, we had so many Spanish-speaking corners going on. And it was okay because we bring somebody else, and then we integrate the language in my team. I send so many emails, mil gracias, right? Or like I said, team, felicidades, like whenever I say promotions, everything like that, just so that they start to see that we're a global community.
Great. And I think we have time for one more here. It came in. I think it really helps us reinforce the first one that we just talked about. And I think maybe Maria and I can share from our own experience or what I've learned as a leader when I ask people. But the question really relates to, how do you recognize that when you need to step up and have the guts to speak up and to get into the conversation. And again, what I've learned, I'll put the lens on first as a leader, right? We're going to build inclusive teams. It makes no sense to build that if in fact, you're not going to pull out everything you can from that team. But what I've learned so much is asking the quiet person at the table who looked like they were just ready to say something to, talk about what's on their mind. And then you hear this amazing breakthrough, right? But from a personal one, I would tell you, we've all been in that situation where you think, but you also may think that ultimately that you're not completely certain and you may embarrass yourself. And it wasn't until personally I overcame that ability to embarrass myself and be wrong that I was able to at least offer that, point of view. And what I found in many respects is it was a point of view that was valuable at that moment. And, but your instinct tells you, but you have to be willing as well, back to that ability to, whether it's embarrass yourself or have the wrong answer, but you're not going to know if you don't really step out there. I don't know, Maria, would you offer any other guidance on that?
Totally agree. Wisdom and courage. That's what I'll tell you guys, right? Courage is that ability to speak up when you know you need to. And wisdom is to know when to say something and when, you really don't need to die on this battle today. And for those that know me, and Thaddeus, you know this, that was a hard lesson for Maria for many years. I didn't mind speaking up, but I didn't always have to. So I think it's that wisdom, guys, that comes with times and experience. Read the room. Most of us read the room really well. Is this the right time to have this conversation with this audience? Or should I be having this conversation also one-on-one? And there are times you must speak up in a large group. And that requires courage from you and conviction that what you're saying, sorry, your facts behind you, in that you believe in it.
Great. And who's the timekeeper? I want to make sure that we don't run over. I know there's one more, Maria, but I'm going to turn it over to you. It's your session. I didn't mean to take it over. It's my natural thing.
No, we're all okay. So I'm used to it and it's totally fine. How do we get to know each other to cross-pollinate our talents as opportunities in one company? And this network may help us open roles for other Latino talent to be truly retained and grown across companies. I feel that we get heads down on our jobs and we could improve on supporting each other outside of high-tech once-a-year sessions. That's a great question. And I think, Thaddeus, that's probably one of the things that I'm, naturally okay with, which is I like to connect to people and I invest in relationships. Investing in relationships shouldn't be about I'm trying to get a job. It should be authentic. And I'm a big believer of these guys. If you really resonate with somebody, invest in them. I have many high-tech peers and family members that ping me on LinkedIn and say, can we please talk? I want your advice on X, Y, Z. And you give it, right? So I think it's that connectedness without the intent of doing something different, and that you invest in those relationships that with time will become that magnet that allows you to have the connections when you want to seek opportunities or explore new things, to have somebody that you can lean on. Thaddeus?
I think importantly too, Maria, is don't underestimate the need to find some platforms, right? And you want to build, and Maria highlighted a very important area. You got to go build that, right? And build your own community where it makes sense. But platforms like high tech this is like one of the best examples. Now, as we move back to a much more normal future where we ultimately now even get to come back together, we're there. We're right at that moment. You're going to have to invest in communities like this, because that's the way you'll get organic relationships and you'll get this cross-pollination. And I would tell you, I think this is one of the best examples, and based on feedback I've received, and even myself as a leader, I learn a lot from everybody around me, but it wouldn't happen if I didn't invest in that. And as we get back to the new, the physical way, choose a couple of these, especially when we get back to the live events. But that's really, if you don't invest the time, you'll never be able to bring that cross element to it.
Yeah. And listen, Thaddeus, you and I can talk forever. That, which is, why this has been so much fun. Thank you for spending time sharing your wisdom. And thank you for, again, another conversation where we learn and get enlightened quite a bit from each other. And for the rest of the high-tech familia, I hope you feel the same way, because every conversation you have here is an opportunity where you can learn, we can share with each other and become better just by our interactions. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you, guys.
Stretch your legs, but don't go far. At this